thought I'd run you through Windows Virtual Desktop and how that gets deployed and how it integrates with Zscaler and Zscaler App. So a bit of a high-level overview. There are two modes of deployment of Windows Virtual Desktop. A pooled mode, where lots of users can sign into the single virtual machine, and a personal mode, where everybody gets their own virtual machine assigned to them. And if we look at the gallery deployment, the virtual machines that Microsoft provides to you, obviously you can go and create your own or whatever. It essentially then comes down into two instance types: Windows 10 Enterprise Multi-Session and Windows 10 Enterprise. The multi-session actually runs on Windows Server 2016. So multiple users, because it's a server, can sign into the same instance simultaneously. Clearly, it's the best utilization of virtual machine resources. I can deploy a virtual machine with kind of 8 or 16 cores, lots of memory, and lots of users can sign into that, and they all share those resources. The challenge is that Zscaler App and the way that it intercepts traffic at a network level cannot distinguish between which user is which. We intercept traffic at a lightweight filter mode at the kernel level. At that point, you've lost context of is it user A or user B, and so when we pass that traffic up to the Zscaler App, we've got no context to know is it user A or user B. So there are other limitations within Windows Server around the way that those kernel drivers work and everything. So Zscaler App is limited. It will not install on a server, not only because of those this intercept of the tunnels, but because of the kernel drivers that are used on Windows Server. Similarly, you could run Windows Server 10 Enterprise Multi-Session in a personal mode, but it doesn't really make any sense. Every user gets their own instance of Windows Server 2016. It's probably the worst utilization of resources because you're over-provisioning resources and you're consuming server licenses for when they're not needed. And you still have those limitations of the way those kernel drivers work. Although you've got an instance that is dedicated to a user, you're still limited. And as such, this is not an option for deploying Zscaler App. So Windows 10 Enterprise Multi-Session or any kind of instance of 2016 or server will not run or support Zscaler. It's worth a little side note on this though. You could deploy pooled mode and send traffic via a GRE or an IPsec tunnel to Zscaler. So we can support those users and that user traffic passing through Zscaler. However, it's worth being aware, GRE is not supported on Azure because Azure uses that in the background, so it's IPsec only. And of course, you're still going to see lots of users coming from the same source IP address. So when it comes to making a per user policy and authentication policy, you need to be looking at things like Kerberos authentication from those machines to Zscaler as an explicit proxy in those tunnels. So there are other caveats that need to be considered in that. So this may not be the most ideal way to deploy. Certainly Zscaler App is not supported, but also when it comes to tunnel, you need tunnel with an explicit proxy if you want to do per user or per group policy. And to be able to do that, you need to have Kerberos support within the browser. And obviously things like surrogate IPs then don't work. So there are some limitations if you want to do that user granularity or per user logging. So let's put this to the side and look at Windows 10 Enterprise. So I can deploy this in a pooled mode. Again, it's Windows 10 user thing, and one user can sign in at a time. So in a pooled mode, lots of users can sign into the same machine, and what that actually results in the functionality is, user A is logged in, user B comes along and says, I want to log into that virtual machine. User A will be asked to sign out so that user B can sign in. So you need to make sure you've got enough capacity to be able to handle that. And it kind of will work if you're in a kind of bastion host kind of thing where you want users to be able to have a desktop that enables them to remote desktop or SSH onto other things, and they're doing a very short period of time for that. And so there are very specific use cases for it, but I don't think in a large deployment where you've got lots of remote workers that need their desktop for 8 hours a day, this is necessarily the right way to go. In fact, it's probably not the right way to go. So you're really looking at the Windows 10 Enterprise Personal. Multiple users can sign in with this. Every user has a virtual machine assigned to them. You're going to over provision in some respects. You're going to say, okay, I've got 100 users, I need 100 virtual machines. Or if you look at your concurrency, you might say, well, I've got a 50% concurrency rate. I'll have 50 machines for my 100 users. So it's not the best utilization of virtualization resources, but it does work. Interestingly, I've managed to split utilization with an S and virtualization with a Z over here, and utilization with a Z and virtualization with an S over here. So, I'm flicking between my English and my US English as we go through. But of course, because it's Windows 10 Enterprise, the Zscaler app can be installed. Each instance is separate, so you get the multi-user support. So let's take a look at how that gets set up. So I'm in a hybrid environment. I've got my on-premise Active Directory replicated with my Azure AD, but I've also needed to deploy Azure AD domain services. So this is essentially a virtual machine which is running Windows Server that is a replica of my on-premise AD. And the reason for that is to present a network, and that network or networks provide a routed connection from my Windows virtual desktop to this domain controller, essentially, to enable them to join the domain. So you need to have that as a prerequisite if you're in a hybrid joined environment. The other thing I've done in the background is I've done all the prerequisites for Windows Virtual Desktop. So I've created RDS groups, I've set the permissions, there's a number of things that you need to do before you can start up, and all that's covered in the Microsoft help, so permissions and things like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to come home on this and create a resource, and we're going to go Windows Virtual Desktop, and it's already there. So I can create that, and I've got my subscription. There's limitations in this which I'll go through in a second, and I'm going to deploy it to that WVD resource group, which is going to present me that ability to target that domain controller. I'm in the UK, so UK South. My host pool name, well, I'm going to deploy the pooled. I'm going to call this WVD pooled 21 because it's the 21st today, and I'm going to assign it to my two default users, mryan at welshgeek.net and dewal at welshgeek.net. Okay, so by default it gives you, like, what does it look like for 100 users? Well, for 100 users in a pooled mode, it's actually going to deploy 7 virtual machines that have got 4 virtual CPUs or vCPUs, 16 gig of memory. Well, I don't need that. I'm a light user. It's only going to be for 2 users. And it drops it all the way down to 4 vCPUs, but I actually don't need that for this demo, and I don't want to be consuming all of that capacity if I don't need to. So let's deploy at this size, which is 2 vCPUs and 8 gig of RAM. And the prefix, when these virtual machines get created in that resource pool, I'm just going to call them WVD pool 21, just so I can identify them. So the VM settings, okay, and as we said, there are these operating systems already provided to you in the gallery. These are the Windows Server ones. This one comes with Office installed. Windows Server Multi-Session, Data Center, Server Edition if you wanted to create your own kind of customized desktops or whatever. But we know that those won't work, so we're just going to select Windows 10 Enterprise, and I need to provide a user principal name that's going to allow this to join my directory. So it's join at welshgeek.net. Hopefully I've typed that right. Yes, they all match. And I need to specify the VNet that has the routing ability to my my domain controller. So it's in this /24. Let's go ahead. Now this is the tenant, as I said, that I'd already created. So there's a bunch of PowerShell scripts you need to run to create these. So this is called WVD-Welsh Geek. So it's important that that is typed in correctly. And I need to give a UPN, a user that has access to create that. So that's myself. Obviously, in a production environment, you'd create a service account that has the ability to add things into this, but I'm not doing that. So let's go ahead and create that. It validates all that configuration, and then it goes, and I can click create, and it'll go off and do that job. So it's created its template, and it'll sit here, and we can refresh this, and it's created all of these things. So that's going to go away and do that. It's 11:44 at the moment. It'll probably take about 10 minutes to do that. So whilst that's going, I'm going to come back and I'm going to create a new resource of Windows Virtual Desktop. And this time I'm going to select the personal. So still going to go into the same resource group, WVD. It's going to go into UK South. And this time it's WVD PERS 21. And we're mryan@welshgeek.net and dwal@welshgeek.net. And you can see it instantly changes because it's a personal mode. If I say I want 100 users, it's 100 virtual machines. So I don't want that. I want 2 virtual machines. And again, I'm going to select a lower spec of virtual machine. And these are WVD PERS 21. And we can select next. And we're going to go Windows 10 Enterprise. We're going to select join@welshgeek.net. We create that and we select the VNet that has access. So we're good on that. Again, WVD Welsh Geek. UPN mryan@welshgeek.net. And we're good to go. Review and create it. It's going to check all of these things, make sure that I didn't reuse the same host pool name and all of that kind of stuff. These tenants exist, and we click create. So now we've got 2 deployments going on. We can look at these deployments. This one is going through and creating these linked templates and everything. It'll create the virtual machines. This one here is only just getting going. We can come in here and we can look at our resource group, WVD, and we can see these things being created. So here's the pool, and here's the personal one being created. You can see it creates the disks, and it'll create the network adapters and the virtual machine to be able to spin those up. So as we refresh these, we'll see things being created. In the personal mode, you can see it's actually creating 2 virtual machines, one VM for each type that I was creating. So you can see the resources that are being allocated to do this. So this is going to take a little bit of time to run. It's building out these. It's waiting for those VMs to start up. So we'll wait here. It's 11:47 now. We'll give it a couple of minutes and wait for these VMs to be created. Okay, so we now have the Windows Virtual Desktop instances provisioned. I've got my pool created, and I've got my personal instances created. So I've gone ahead and already downloaded the Zscaler app, ready to be installed on these devices as part of the build. So I'll just go ahead and show you what this looks like from first principles. So actually what we'll do is we'll browse to rdweb microsoft.com/web client. I'm already signed in as Mark Ryan, so I get presented with my pooled or my personal instances. So let's go ahead and do the pooled instance. It's going to connect and ask me to sign in. And I sign in here, mryan@welshgeek.net. Okay, and so before I go and do anything on this as far as ZPA is concerned, or Zscaler App is concerned, I'm going to come in here and go to rdweb.microsoft.com on a Safari browser. And at this point, it's going to ask me to log in, and here I'm going to log in as Davil. So my second user, just to show you what the user experience looks like on this. So I've got the two instance types here, and I'm going to connect here to the pooled model. I'm going to click allow, and what it's going to do is it's going to try and connect first off. Welshgeek.net. And it's going to go, someone else is already signed in because I'm signed in on this machine. Do I want to sign in anyway? So I'll click yes, and it's going to go, right, okay, well, I'm going to wait for this user to respond. It's going to go, now Davil wants to log in. What do I want to do? Do I want to allow them? It'll disconnect automatically in 30 seconds, or do I want to deny them? Well, actually, I want to deny Davil coming into this machine. And so that user will say, no, you've been denied. So clearly, in the pooled model on the Windows Enterprise version, you can only have one user signed in at a time. So we need to think about that. So I'm going to start Davil up on the personal mode. No, I'm not. I'm going to log him in as Davil at welshgeek.net. And allow him to connect and sign in and everything. So I'll come back to Davil's machine in a second. So I'm signed in here as the pooled machine. I'm going to go ahead and install Zscaler App. So I've got Zscaler App downloaded. I'm going to run. I've created an installer shortcut here, just to show you what that's going to do. No jiggery pokery. It's going to automatically sign in with my domain and Zscaler 2. So I'm passing it those install parameters. I could have built this using Intune or as part of the deployment scripts, but I wanted to show you this from first principles. So and it was simpler. So let's go ahead and run that. It'll go and install the Zscaler app. We click next. And of course, as a user, you wouldn't get to see this if it was automatically deployed. The Zscaler app would be simply run. Okay, so we click finish, and it'll automatically launch the Zscaler app. We'll see the app come down here in the system tray, and because I've passed it those system parameters, it's going to go ahead and install and start up. And automatically log on with all my domain credentials. With a bit of luck, that's already happened. Now, we'll possibly see a slight pause in the screen whilst the network adapters are instantiated. Okay, so Zscaler app is up and running. We have connectivity. We can see that it's deployed. One thing to notice, I'm using zTunnel 2.0, and it's deployed in TLS mode. It seems that Microsoft are blocking DTLS in the Azure cloud. So TLS is the mode that you need to use when you're deploying Zscaler app in Azure. So it's all up and running here. Let's close down this. And let's do a couple of things. So I'll start off with a command prompt. I could do, if I ping connector.welshgeek.net, my actual connector, you can see it's resolving 164 address. So I can SSH connector.welshgeek.net. Actually I need to username, and you see I'm able to SSH onto the connector, and that's all working. I could map network drives or whatever. I could curl HTTP sent host.welshgeek.net. Probably going to get a pop-up on that. Let me find something else that's actually running in my curl HTTP wwd.welshgeek.net. Should hit my auto discovery rule. Ping wwd.welshgeek.net. So ZPA is what running, and if I look at if I go to ip.zscaler.com, this is passing through Zscaler Internet Access, 888.com is blocked, https facebook.com is going through, and we've got our intermediate certs for SSL inspection. And then if I was to, because we're running ztunnel 2.0, if I was to SSH onto my AWS, for example, that would connect through. So we can go into admin.zscaler2.net. Let's sign in here. Let's take a look at our firewall logs. Let's take a look at the logs for the last couple of minutes. Apply filters, and we can see we've got from this user's machine 10. Let's come over here. We're 10.0.75, and we can see that we've got some traffic passing through, hitting Zscaler. Interestingly, I see 164.11. It's because it's ICMP, and ICMP isn't allowed for ZPA, so it bypasses ZPA and goes into the tunnel. So we have traffic that's actually hitting the firewall. If I did a SSH to something. Let's take that. Uh, 35, 155, 162.38. It's obviously going to fail because I don't have a private key on this machine. But if we come in and we take a look at the, there we go. So there's our SSH connection. So it's coming in via the firewall. So we've demonstrated that Zscaler App, Zscaler Internet Access, and Zscaler Private Access deploys in the Azure Virtual Desktop, Windows Virtual Desktop. So let's go ahead and take a look at what it looks like in the in the personal mode. So here in the personal mode, I can launch this as in this Mark Ryan instance. So again, I log in here, mryan@welshgeek.net. And I get my dedicated desktop. And I've obviously got my personal desktop here for Davil. And you can see this one gets 7.7. And this one will get 7.8. So each user is getting a dedicated instance for them. And what I can then do, so let's go ahead and install Zscaler App. So go to my downloads with the same shortcut. And we'll go ahead and install that. Click yes on that. And we'll do the same for Davil's machine here. Downloads shortcut. Davil's machine is locked down, so I need to provide an administrator account. Again, if we deployed this using Intune, this would all happen in the background. Go ahead and install and deploy the drivers and everything. Click finish on that. So the Apple launch, as you can see, it's launching in the background over here. Click finish on that one, and it's launching in the background on the Davil's machine as well. You can close these windows down. You can see it's doing the transparent authentication in the background. Take a look at Davil's over here. So this is started up. You can see it's davil@welshgeek.net. Internet and private access. So again, we're working there. My Guacamole server isn't running, but we could do WVD.net. We'll take a look at my my NAS box, which will come up, and the same for this HTTPS website. And show that the SSL inspection is working. So we'll come back to this desktop. Take a look, open Zscaler. Seems to be having a bit of connectivity challenge. It's now connected. It's all up and working. And let's do the same thing over here. So my NAS box. Via ZPA and facebook.com to show you an HTTPS website being intercepted. So we've got the personal modes working, we've got the pooled modes working with Windows Virtual Desktop. And I just want to emphasize the challenges with deploying Zscaler in Azure Virtual in Azure with Windows Virtual Desktop. Couple of things to point out. When you deploy it in your forwarding profile, you can use zTunnel 2.0. If you use DTLS, Azure will seem to block it. It'll start up, and you seem to have some very odd behavior between HTTP and HTTPS. HTTP seems to succeed, but not all the time. HTTPS seems to have more challenges with DTLS, even adjusting the MTU doesn't seem to resolve it. Although DTLS could fall back to TLS, I think because it's got the connectivity, it never actually falls back. So you need to explicitly set TLS. The other thing in the app profile, a couple of things to consider. You've obviously got your RFC 1918 addresses to bypass. There are some specific IP addresses in the Microsoft ranges. So 169.254, 169.254 is your metadata URL. So that needs to be explicitly bypassed for the host to be able to retrieve its metadata. There are a bunch of IP addresses in Azure. I've bypassed the whole of this /8, which is clearly not ideal to get this working. If you take a look at the actual Azure ranges, there is a let's show this. This is the public ranges for Azure, and so you need to. There's a whole load of quite wide ranges in here. But for example, I did UK South for my deployment, and so you need to look at the ones where there's the API that needs to be accessed. So you can see that's within that 51 range for the API. The app service, there's a whole bunch of ranges within that Microsoft call out specifically, and so it's worth putting those into the Windows Virtual Desktop, those Windows Virtual Desktop ranges into these. Now, obviously, that takes a little bit of adding and playing around with, so I bypassed the whole ranges to get this to work. So some things we could do, or the client will need to do in their forwarding policy. This is zTunnel 2.0 configuration. Of course, if you were deploying with zTunnel 1.0, you would need to do that in the pack file to bypass. Alternatively, you could use tunnel with local proxy, or just straight explicit proxy, or whatever. You could use GRE or IPsec, but of course, all of the users' traffic is then coming from when you're using the pooled mode. You need to think about IP surrogacy. In the personal mode, you should be fine, provided you've got to consider the re-authentication timers for that as well. So, hope this was useful. Any feedback, let me know. Mark at zscaler.com. Thank you.